We basically walk around all day with these incredible high-definition cameras sitting right behind our eyes.
Right, capturing millions of pixels of data every single second.
Exactly. Colors, movements, faces, objects. And because our eyes are open, we just naturally assume that we are seeing everything there is to see.
We definitely equate an open eye with an open mind.
We do. But looking and seeing are two entirely different things. So today, we are tearing down the barrier between those two concepts. We are doing a deep dive into a framework from our sources that suggests the universe is, well, it's constantly whispering to you.
Well, you might be completely missing it.
Right, because you're reading the signs all wrong. And the goal today isn't to just throw more facts at you, but to figure out how to actually read the facts of your life correctly.
Yeah, and the distinction between the optical and the cognitive is really where this entire framework lives. I mean, the eye receives an image, which is pure biology.
Just photons hitting the retina.
Exactly, but understanding, actually making sense of that image and assigning it meaning is a completely separate, highly active neurological process. So everyone looks at the same physical world, but because of how our brains interpret those inputs, not everyone lives in the same psychological reality.
Meaning things and events aren't just, silent occurrences. Truth rarely shouts at us. It communicates through signs.
It's a subtle broadcast.
Yeah, and to actually hear that whisper, you need a bridge between the raw data of life and your own understanding.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a major trap we all fall into, the difference between a surface reading of reality and a deep reading.
Because we aren't just looking at objects all day, we're looking at events. We are experiencing adversity.
Constantly. So let's look at how this plays out.
Well, let's apply this to a situation that happens to all of us. Consider a scenario where a carefully laid plan completely falls apart. You wanted a specific outcome, you worked for it, and it just evaporates.
The absolute worst feeling.
It is. And psychologically speaking, there are two distinct ways a human being can process this failure. The surface reading is an immediate, automatic reaction. You just think, I'm unlucky.
Which, feels entirely justified in the moment.
Yeah.
You feel the sting of the failure, so you naturally conclude that the universe is just dealing you a bad hand.
Right, it feels justified, but look at what that specific interpretation mechanically does to your brain. It narrows your options.
Also?
Well, it shifts your locus of control entirely to the outside world, right? It turns you into a passive victim of circumstance. Your brain literally stops looking for solutions because it has categorized the event as a permanent, unchangeable trait of the universe.
Oh, wow.
But the deep reading of that exact same failed plan triggers a completely different cognitive pathway. It asks, what is this trying to teach me?
So it's the exact same event, but two completely different lives resulting from it.
Precisely.
The first interpretation just shrinks you down and breeds learned helplessness. But the second one expands your awareness and forces your brain to treat the failure as usable data.
Yes.
And then there's the second scenario from the text, which I think is actually far tougher. Someone hurts you.
Oh, yeah. That's a hard one.
Right. They say something completely out of line and you feel that immediate sting of betrayal or anger. The surface reading is simply, they wronged me.
Which is the easiest conclusion to jump to.
But the deep reading demands you ask, what did I misunderstand? What did I exaggerate? What is my responsibility here?
And we really need to draw a very hard line here about what this framework is actually suggesting. Doing a deep reading is not about accepting injustice.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
It is not about becoming a doormat or enabling toxic behavior from someone else. It is purely about striving for an accurate, unfiltered read of reality. Because misreading a situation kicks off a very specific, dangerous cascade of consequences.
Okay, let's unpack this. Or, actually, let me push back for a second. Because I have to admit, my initial reaction to this second scenario is a lot of resistance.
That's completely normal.
Isn't it just exhausting to always look for a deep meaning or your own personal responsibility when someone is just being a flat-out jerk? Sometimes it feels like doing a deep read is the equivalent of reading the entire terms and conditions of a software update, instead of just clicking accept and getting on with your day.
That is a great way to put it.
Do we really have to do the deep read every single time someone cuts us off in traffic or makes a passive-aggressive comment?
Well, that analogy hits the nail on the head. We want to just click accept on our quick emotional reactions because the brain is inherently lazy. It wants to save energy.
Right, a surface read feels way faster.
But skipping that deep read is what actually causes systemic exhaustion in the long run. Let's look at that cascade of consequences I mentioned. If you misread an event, say, interpreting a clumsy comment as a malicious attack that misread produces the wrong emotion. You feel intense anger instead of, mild annoyance.
Which then completely floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline.
Precisely. And operating under the wrong emotion leads to the wrong decision. You lash out, you sever a relationship, or you just retreat entirely.
So it snowballs.
Exactly. Over time, a series of wrong decisions gradually directs your entire life down the wrong path. So while the surface read is cheap up front, it costs you a fortune later.
Because you're constantly battered by the winds of circumstance.
Right. You are perpetually fighting bad luck or bad people, which is a massively draining way to live. The deep read takes more cognitive effort in the moment, but it anchors you. It prevents you from spiraling down a path built on a faulty interpretation.
So the surface read is basically the junk food of emotional processing. It tastes good for a second, but you pay for it later.
That's exactly it.
But this raises a fascinating paradox from the essay. If deep reading is so crucial to our long-term well-being, why do so many smart, incredibly well-informed people fail to do it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Because we live in an era where people know so much. We read constantly, we watch documentaries, we analyze endless streams of data, yet highly educated people still routinely fail to interpret their own lives correctly.
Well, because the missing ingredient in human understanding isn't information. I mean, we are drowning in information. The fundamental problem is a lack of what philosophers and cognitive scientists might call a measure.
A measure. Okay, let's define that because it sounds like a tool, but it's actually a foundational mental framework.
A measure is the internal baseline you use for interpretation. It is knowing according to what you think.
Right.
Every time your brain processes reality, it bounces the incoming data off a pre-existing baseline. If you have no conscious, solid measure, your brain just defaults to whatever external input is loudest.
So you become entirely ruled by temporary emotional spikes.
Exactly. Shaped by the opinions of your immediate environment and scattered by sudden impulses.
So what does this all mean practically?
Yeah.
It's like having the most powerful telescope in the world.
Okay, I like this.
That telescope represents all the information and data we have access to today. You can see galaxies light years away. But if the tripod holding that telescope is sitting on quicksand, meaning you have no measure, the image will always be a blurry mess.
Yes.
The knowledge is entirely useless because the foundation it rests on is constantly shifting.
The quicksand is a perfect representation of a baseline rooted in shifting external validation or just pure ego. When your measure is just how I feel in this exact second, the data is meaningless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you have a solid measure, a foundation rooted in seeking truth or objective reality, then even with very little knowledge, you can arrive at the right conclusion. You don't need a million data points if your filtering algorithm is properly calibrated.
This forces a pretty uncomfortable mirror in front of you as a listener, honestly. According to what do I see?
It's a tough question.
Do I interpret my day according to my temporary desires? Do I see things based on what my social media feed tells me to care about? Or do I interpret things according to truth itself? It sounds simple, but honestly answering that question fundamentally alters the trajectory of a life.
It alters it because it changes your relationship with the external world. Once you establish that internal measure, you can actually shift your focus to external observation.
And this is where the text transitions, right?
Right. The framework asserts something quite profound here. The sky does not fall silent. The earth does not fall silent. The universe is actually broadcasting all the time.
But we miss it.
Because we suffer from a severe dulling of perception through habit. We look at our surroundings and we just see scenery instead of a message.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because there's a biological reason for this. It's like nose blindness.
Oh, sensory gating.
Yes. If you cook a heavily spiced meal in your house, after an hour, you don't even smell it anymore. The scent molecules haven't left the room. Your brain just stopped registering them.
Right. It filters out constant stimuli to focus on new threats.
Exactly. We have literally become nose blind to the universe. We are so used to the scenery of our lives, the sun coming up, the changing seasons, that our brains filter out the meaning to save processing power.
And sensory gating is crucial for survival, obviously, but it's disastrous for meaning. We get so used to the mechanics of the world that we stop asking questions.
Just glaze over.
We look at the sun rising every single morning and no curiosity arises within us. But this approach insists that everything around us is a sign. Everything is a pointer.
If you only look at the appearance, you get scenery.
But if you manually override that biological filter and search for meaning, you encounter a message.
So how do we break the nose blindness? Like, how do we become a guest in our own house again and actually smell what's cooking?
Well, it starts by changing the questions you ask when you look at ordinary things. Let's take the most obvious thing above us, the sky.
Yep.
A surface read of the night sky is purely aesthetic. You look up and say, oh, how beautiful. But a deep read asks a fundamentally different question. It asks, what does this massive order point to? When people of genuine insight look at the stars, they don't just see scattered balls of burning gas.
They perceive proportion.
Exactly. They recognize that there is an underlying structure to reality, which points to a power far beyond their own daily anxieties.
It totally shifts the perspective from aesthetics to awe. And this framework applies it to the smallest things, too. Like a tree or a tiny seed.
Yes, the micro scale.
Instead of just looking at a tree and saying, how green, you ask, how does this life actually emerge? When you hold a seed in your hand, you aren't just looking at a speck of matter. You are witnessing life emerging from something that looks entirely lifeless. You are seeing the physical manifestation of renewal.
It's a profound shift in awareness.
I mean, I'm tracking with you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If I'm running late for a crucial meeting and I stop on the sidewalk to deeply ponder the renewal hidden within the stillness of an acorn, I'm going to get fired.
Fair point.
My boss doesn't care about the underlying structure of reality. They care about the quarterly report. How does someone apply this in a hyper-busy modern life without turning into someone completely detached from their actual responsibilities?
It's a vital pushback because the goal isn't to walk around in a perpetual paralyzed trance.
Okay, good.
Deep reading isn't about the amount of time you spend staring at an object. It is about the quality of your attention in the micro moments of your day.
So it's fast.
It takes a fraction of a second to reframe your perception. The framework extends this to human interaction too. When you see a child smile, it doesn't require a 10-minute meditation to look past how sweet and ask what that clarity and innocence reminds you of.
Oh, I see. It's a cognitive reflex, not some time-consuming ritual.
Right. And it changes how you process the passage of time.
Yeah.
When you observe the end of the day, the setting sun, it's not just an indicator that you need to turn on the headlights. It is a daily, built-in reminder of transience. It brings an unavoidable awareness of finitude. A deep read of the evening forces you to reflect on your own direction, asking, am I moving toward what actually matters, or am I just busy?
Which naturally leads to the most confronting example of all turning that deep read inward. Looking at yourself in the mirror and moving past the biological fact of I am living to the philosophical question, what is the meaning of this life given to me?
That's the ultimate deep read.
And the truth isn't hidden away in some secret vault. It only appears hidden because we stubbornly remain on the surface. But doing this, actually overriding that sensory gating and curing the nose blindness, requires a physical and mental shift. We have to change how we exist in time.
The framework draws a very hard line here regarding the mechanics of perception. Seeing requires a specific physical and mental state stillness.
Stillness.
Yeah. The enemy of seeing isn't blindness. The enemy is rushing. A person in constant frantic motion simply cannot perceive meaning.
Because they're just surviving.
Exactly. When you are endlessly rushing from task to task, your brain is entirely occupied with threat detection and navigation. When you are endlessly consuming scrolling, watching, reacting, your cognitive bandwidth is maxed out. You cannot understand what you do not have the space to process.
Let's use a mechanical analogy here to explain why rushing destroys perception. When you are rushing, your mind is basically a camera shooting at an incredibly high shutter speed.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's capturing 1,000 frames a second, trying to keep up with your to-do list and your social media feed. But because the shutter is open for only a fraction of a millisecond, hardly any light gets in.
Right.
So the resulting image is dark, blurry, and chaotic. You can't make out any details.
And in that analogy, stillness is simply lowering the shutter speed.
Wait, not just exactly. It's a fundamental change in the mechanism of capturing reality. When you lower the shutter speed, you take in fewer frames per second, but you let enough light in to finally see the details. The edges become sharp, the shadows reveal depth.
And when you lower that internal shutter speed, when a person becomes inwardly quiet and finally asks that key question, what is this showing me? The framework notes that a door begins to open.
Wow.
Now, it acknowledges that this stillness will feel highly unfamiliar at first. Our nervous systems are completely trained for the high shutter speed.
We're addicted to the rushing.
We are. But if you persist through the initial discomfort, the answers reveal themselves. And when that happens, you step into a reality where the definitions of the ordinary are completely rewritten.
And the redefinitions offered here are just stunning because they show how this philosophical shift alters your emotional baseline.
Complete.
Like once you undergo this transformative pause, night is no longer just the absence of light. It becomes rest. It becomes a covering, a necessary biological and spiritual pause. Day is no longer just sunlight and the start of the daily grind. It becomes opportunity, forward movement, and trust.
Even the weather changes its meaning. Rain is no longer just water ruining your plans. A deep read sees it as mercy, renewal, and the quiet provision of life to the earth.
And bringing it full circle back to adversity, which is where we started.
Right.
When you have a measure and you slow down the shutter speed, difficulty fundamentally transforms. It is no longer a punishment. It actually becomes a teacher. Loss isn't just a void of pain. It becomes a poignant reminder of the value of what you had.
And a delay in your plans isn't a curse or a sign that you are unlucky. It becomes a redirection. This is the ultimate measurable promise of this entire approach. If we connect this to the overarching narrative of human psychology, the realization is this: your life is not defined by the events that happen to you. Your life is defined by the narrative your brain constructs about those events.
It's defined by how you read them.
Exactly. The tangible results of shifting from surface reading to deep reading are very real. When you make this shift, your daily complaints decrease, your situational awareness increases, your knee-jerk emotional reactions soften.
You stop lashing out.
Right. You no longer rush to judgment, you pause, you reflect, and you actually try to understand the mechanics of the moment.
It is literally a complete operating system upgrade for how you move through the world. You upgrade from a reactive piece of hardware to a proactive, meaning-making engine.
That's a great way to summarize it.
To really cement this, our sources included two beautiful poetic couplets that perfectly distill everything we've talked about today.
I love these.
Yeah, first one goes, "I thought I saw yet a veil was over my sight. Once I learned to read, all things turned into light."
It perfectly captures the transition from merely looking with biological eyes, covered by the veil of habituation, to truly seeing with a calibrated mind.
And the second couplet is just as good. "I saw the night as darkness, the day as something plain. Then I saw they were signs, and I'd only glanced in vain."
A powerful summary of the tragedy of the surface read, "Everyone glances, but not everyone understands. The universe is not just scenery, it is an address directed at you."
But you have to be ready to receive it.
Right. To receive that address, you have to establish your measure, break your habituation, and stop rushing. The effort it takes to see reality rightly is one of the greatest cognitive gifts you can ever give yourself.
A gift that turns the ordinary background noise of life into a clear, direct message. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how to interpret the events and the nature around you, how to look past the surface of the things happening to you.
Yeah.
But let's flip the lens for a second to close this out. If you are part of this exact same universe, moving through the same time and space as everyone else, what kind of sign are your daily actions leaving for the people who are trying to read you?